The General Assembly Handbook by Anna von Reitz. Section 6. Pointers and Questions. There are some issues being brought forward by various parties, some of whom are concerned and others who just want me to address specific issues. So this is a nuts and bolts presentation of information that isn't coordinated around any specific theme beyond answering questions people have. Question 1. What is Mr. Trump's republic about? The reforms they are making sound great and in line with what you are doing. Should we just wait and see what happens before we make all this effort to form general assemblies? Answer. Remember, there are two gangs, one territorial and one municipal, and neither one is supposed to be running this country. It is the right, duty, and responsibility of the actual people in each state to operate their federation of states to run this country. And in order to do that, they must take up the work of forming their state general assemblies. Forming and operating our state general assemblies is the only way to fully restore the government we are supposed to have, i.e., finish the Reconstruction, and then determine where we want to go from there. Mr. Trump is fully honoring his duty as Commander-in-Chief and protecting America and Americans. For that, he is to be lauded and loved. A great many other presidents have grossly abused their position of trust and have allowed personal cowardice and/or self-interest to enter into their decision-making process. I respect Donald Trump, and so should everyone else. He does not act as a lobbyist for the Republican Party, and he does not back down for the Democrat lobbyists either. He charts a course that is best for America as a whole and keeps steady on. We should all be grateful for and to Donald Trump, including the millions of rank-and-file Democrats who have listened to their party leadership and the so-called mainstream media instead of using their own eyes and noses. Whatever Donald Trump's picadillo roster may include, he is, number one, devoted to America, number two, an excellent businessman, number three, a generous heart. He has, without undue pressure on the public purse, vastly increased employment opportunities, especially for women, blacks, and Hispanics, expanded our economy, regained control of destructive trade agreements, and is working to secure our border, without which we wouldn't have a country anymore. The gross self-interest, and if I may say so, stupidity of the municipal government leadership has led to unnecessary suffering that is entirely the fault of members of Congress and the bought and paid for press corps, a social class of dishonest, arrogant pretenders who all pull their stories off the same wire services instead of doing anything resembling actual investigative journalism, yet want us to respect and trust their opinions as law. They are parroting whatever comes in via the Associated Press, and who are they? And Reuters, and who are they? And that has been the degraded and deplorable condition of American journalism for decades. Mr. Trump is exactly right when he calls them fakes. They are pretending to be journalists and not doing their job. They are in fact functioning as well-paid lobbyists and propagandists with no great respect for facts or law, and are the ones pushing former CIA Chief Hayden's vision of a post-truth society, i.e., a world run on the basis of lies, lies, and more lies. A virtual war has been and is being fought in Hollywood, California, among those who espouse this criminal insanity and those who do not. So, no. We can't afford to sit on our rumps at the stadium and watch the show and do nothing but hope that the territorial team wins. We do have to get motivated and set up our state and county general assemblies and do the work now. 2. Shouldn't all state assembly members cancel their voter registrations? Yes, they have to. This goes back to the requirement that all the actual land and soil jurisdiction state governments have forbidding dual citizenship. You are either in or out, so far as the states are concerned. The territorial and municipal governments both allow dual citizenship, but in establishing and operating the state general assemblies, We have to work for our state and conduct its business. This goes back to the principle of checks and balances. You can't allow your employees to write their own job descriptions, set their own pay and benefits, and supervise all their own activities, which is precisely what has been going on in this country for far too long. The territorial and municipal governments are both supposed to be dependent on the states to ride herd on their spending and activities. We are supposed to be holding them to their obligations under the terms of the Constitution that apply to them. In 1868, approximately 9 million Americans were disenfranchised, as the original federal states of states were both mothballed and the territorial states of states were substituted. Virtually no one understood what was actually going on because of the deceitfully similar names employed. The state of Maine versus the state of Maine. And narrator's note, the in the first one has a capital T, and the in the second one has a lowercase t. End narrator's note. However, and in fact, this change meant that people were forced to give up their voting rights, quote-unquote voting rights, as shareholders in one set of corporations and to either accept or forego voting rights in a new set of corporations. When people transferred their voting rights to the interlopers, they unwittingly entered a new jurisdiction, that of the British territorial United States, and lost their birthright position on the land and soil jurisdiction of the states by unconsciously accepting dual citizenship. They lost their ability to function as state electors as a direct result and became British subjects. This is precisely what the king wanted and what he achieved via fraud and unconscionable contracts and gross breach of trust. Millions of Americans were thus converted from their natural birthright political status and subjected to the whims of the British king without their knowledge or consent, simply by doing their duty and continuing to vote in what appeared to be normal public elections. That was the first great fraud against the American states and people, carried out by our own paid military and federal municipal employees and our international trustees, the British monarch and the Pope, both of whom were and are completely culpable. So yes, all state assembly members must cancel and expunge all voter registrations and cannot continue to vote in these foreign corporation elections without accepting dual citizenship and thereby making themselves ineligible to function as state citizens. You may think, but that's crazy. I won't be able to control who is in the White House or in the territorial Congress. I will be giving up whatever little bit of influence I have on the direction this country is heading. Remember that their system is all rigged and set up as two gangs. Your vote determines very little in their matrix, and since the advent of hackable, debug voting machines, your vote arguably determines nothing at all. Also remember that whether the issue at hand is territorial or municipal, both are employees of the states. Once you take up your position as the employer, you actually have far more power than any mere voter in their system. It is as a state citizen and an elector that you have the contractual ability to control them. You will also be doing your part to restore the rightful American government this country is owed. Operating as a state citizen and or a state elector allows you to finish the restoration, also known as reconstruction, of the federal states of states, which are supposed to be owned and controlled and operated for the benefit of your state, not the UK and certainly not the Holy Roman Empire. Number 3. We are confused about which state or states we are supposed to be restoring. You talk about setting up the state general assemblies and then talk about reconstructing the federal states of states. It's important to realize that the actual states have never been involved in any of the chaos and chicanery affecting the states of states. We are used to seeing the state of Missouri and state of Alabama and so on. that we started thinking of these organizations as the states, but in fact they are not. The states are operated by the people living in the state. The states of states are operated by employees of the people living in the states. The states have been missing in action because people have not known that it is their right and responsibility and duty to assemble their state general assemblies. They've been letting George do it, literally, and for far too long. Because the people are sovereign and unincorporated and running the actual state is their business, it has been nobody's right or responsibility to tell them that they have to assemble and conduct business, except that the hereditary head of state operating the United States of America, the unincorporated version, can call upon them to assemble as the leader of their federation of states. So, this is what has happened. You have all been summoned to assemble your state general assemblies, to operate your states, elect your officers, select your land and soil jurisdiction courts, reconstruct your federal states of state, exercise your position as an employer, and reclaim your birthright. Doing so is absolutely necessary at this time because the national trust endures for only 3 generations, and the tail end of those 3 generations has come. We have taken the proper steps to reissue our sovereign letters patent to update and renew the national trust, and now you all need to get off your duffs and pull together your state general assemblies. It is true that we need to reconstruct the federal states of states to act in behalf of the states, but only the people of the states can do any of this. The state citizens of each state must act to restore the federal state of state they are owed. Thus, it becomes necessary for us to step forward, identify ourselves as one of the people, instead of acting in the capacity of a foreign person, and assemble the state first. Then we can reconstruct the federal state of state. You can't have any form of state of Florida without a Florida, can you? The very existence of a state of Florida depends on the existence of Florida, and the existence of Florida depends on the existence of the people of Florida, which means the state citizens making up the state general assembly. So, it's showtime, folks. Will the actual people please stand up? Number 4. Can you please explain how all this sleight of hand works? The substitution of one thing for another. There are 2 classic and fundamental such sleights of hand that have led to all the others. The first great fraud, as I described elsewhere, came just after Civil War when a Scottish commercial corporation secretively infringed upon the name of our unincorporated Federation of States and called itself the United States of America, Incorporated. This then was further exacerbated by the same scoundrels deceitfully naming corporate franchises of their new corporation after our federal states of states. In this scam, the state of Virginia, federal, was replaced by the state of Virginia, territorial. And except for some attorneys, territorial Congress members, and guilty generals, the populace was kept in the dark and fed horse hunks. The result was that instead of the states being properly represented and benefiting from their own federal states of states, all the federal states of states were mothballed as assets belonging to the land jurisdiction states, and the territorial states of states were set up to operate for the benefit of the British monarch in the UK. We were diddled, left in the dark, and over time, those who knew the whole story were picked off, forced to flee under threat of death, like my husband's family, or died of natural causes. Until now, 3 generations later, people are in a daze without any idea of what went on here, much less how to fix it and address the problem. So I'm telling you, right here and now, the way to address it is to reclaim your birthright trust interest. Operate in your unincorporated capacity as a state citizen and join and operate your state general assembly. Your state organization, your state general assembly, can then reconstruct your federal state of state to your heart's delight and operate it too. For your your benefit and the benefit of your state, instead of for the benefit of the UK or the Holy Roman Empire, both of which merely have a service contract that they have abused beyond any rational standard. The second great fraud happened in 1933 under the aegis of Great King Rat himself, FDR. This was also a sleight of hand substitution fraud favoring England and the Holy Roman Empire, Office of the Roman Pontiff, Romanus Pontifex Trust. In the first great fraud, they substituted the United States of America, Incorporated, for the United States of America, Unincorporated, and the Federal States of States. For example, the state of Georgia and the state of Maine for territorial states of states operating under very similar names, the state of Georgia and the state of Maine, lowercase t. Only the beneficiaries had changed from the American states and people to the British monarch and the UK. In the second great fraud under FDR, they substituted all our people for their persons. It is much the same shtick, only instead of undermining our federation of states via identity theft and usurping upon our federal states of states by substituting their own territorial states of states under FDR, they stole your identity too. Here's how they did it, and it is a very similar fraud. Under the constitutions and treaties associated with them, the British monarch is named as our trustee on the high seas and inland waterways. Thus, it is that we venture out on the high seas and inland waterways, we have unknowingly been wards of the king. He is obligated to protect us and see to our welfare. The government of Westminster is similarly obligated to aid and protect us. So, to get around this and have an excuse to plunder and pillage us, they pretended that we set sail and were lost at sea. That provided the excuse to set up the Sesta Key V estate trusts in Puerto Rico named after each and every one of us. The British monarch and the Pope, acting as pontiff, then eagerly charged off all the services they were providing via the territorial United States corporations and the municipal United States corporations against these phony territorial trusts. John Philip Miller, a territorial foreign citizen trust, and equally phony municipal estates, all caps, John Philip Miller, and phony municipal public utilities, all caps, John P. Miller, and phony municipal, all caps, charitable trusts, all caps, John Miller. They then also unleashed the members of the bar associations on us, territorial government, to act as licensed privateers and unleash the Internal Revenue Service to act as bill collectors. Our public courts were conveyed to run as private corporate bill collection agencies. The middlemen in this scheme, our employees, were mistaken for the actual employers. In this secretive way, our country and its lawful government was completely usurped by banal traders, and our states were purportedly depopulated, and we ourselves were falsely subjected to foreign powers and treated as slaves in our own country. The linchpin in this scam was our innocent, unincorporated trade name given to us by our parents. This trade name, also known as a given name, allows us to conduct both local, in-state, and international trade within the land and soil jurisdiction of our country. Remember that America is a little bit odd in that every state is a nation. This results in a situation where interstate trade is the same as international trade. Also remember the definition of trade involves business between unincorporated businesses and unincorporated businesses and corporations, while commerce involves business between two incorporated entities. Trade. John Philip Miller, operating in unincorporated natural capacity, buys widgets from 3M Corporation and a glass of lemonade from Sally Lou Jenkins. Commerce. John Philip Miller, Incorporated, operating in the capacity of a franchise corporation of the United States, Inc., buys widget from 3M Corporation. See the difference? Acting in his unincorporated capacity, John Philip Miller is engaged in peaceful private international trade. Acting in any incorporated capacity, John Philip Miller is engaged in public commerce, and is doing so as a franchisee of a parent corporation. This is the kind of enfranchisement the rats were talking about vis-a-vis voting, to take in all your assets, commandeer them as chattel backing their filthy commercial corporations, and subject you to both the British territorial government and the Pope's municipal government. Looking at the name John Philip Miller, it is impossible to tell which capacity the man is operating in. So FDR just arbitrarily decided for his own self-interest to change the legal presumptions of the day and falsely claimed that all the people in America were voluntarily acting as franchises of his favorite bankrupted Roman Catholic nonprofit corporation, doing business as the United States of America Incorporated, which is just a later version of the original Scottish fraud and national identity theft scheme promoted by the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire instead. This allowed the plotters to commandeer our assets, our good names, our private property, even our bodies, so that they could legally impose the draft in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. FDR unlawfully converted the identity of all the people in the America to that of presumed territorial and or municipal persons, that is, incorporated franchises, and he built the National Trust, with the full knowledge and participation of both the British monarch and the Pope. After that, John Philip Miller was no longer automatically identified as a man and one of the people, but instead was interpreted and redefined as an incorporated franchise entity engaged in international commerce and therefore subject to the delegated powers of the so-called federal government, that is, the territorial and municipal interlopers. In order to pull this off and make excuse for their behavior and suppositions, the plotters had to steal our trade names and make this appear to be voluntary on our parts. They started planning for this in the 1920s with various maternity acts that we suppose to apply only to federal employees and dependents, but which morphed into a census-like recording process of live births in each country. It was harmless enough, and unsuspecting people accepted that it was good to have a record of who was born where. In 1933-34, the innocuous recording of live births was weaponized by the commercial fraud artists as a means of identity theft and unlawful conversion of assets on a national scale. Instead of recording live births, they began registering them, enfranchising each little American baby as an abandoned property voluntarily donated to the territorial state of state as a ward of the state by an unwed mother. Lately, that wasn't good enough, so the lying bastards reduced the role of the mother to that of a mere informant, as if our mothers found us in a garbage can and just brought us into the hospital by chance. These are our employees, people on our payroll doing this to us. They had been doing this since the 1930s, and it is with some justification that they look at us like talking horses when we object, and they say, "But this is the way we do it. This is the way we have always done it." Which, from their perspective, is true. None of the territorial or municipal employees we currently deal with can remember any other system or any other set of legal presumptions. So FDR and Corp just presumed that we were all bastard children, abandoned by our mothers, left as wards of the territorial state of state, and the vermin got away with it because people trusted FDR, though he was acting as their president and in their best interest, and couldn't imagine the evil being plotted against the American states and peoples by members of Congress and our sanctimonious international trustees, the British monarchs and the popes, who have always pretended to be our friends and allies. The British territorial United States thus seized upon our trade names and hijacked them into their own territorial jurisdiction in international commerce. This resulted in the creation of a British Territorial Foreign Cities Trust doing business as, for example, John Philip Miller, and also resulted in the territorial state of Ohio being named as beneficiary of his estate when he, poor bastard pauper orphan, was lost at sea, which also then resulted in the municipal United States government setting up the Sestake Trusts in his name. Name is all caps. Via this series of mischaracterizations and misrepresentations, our identities and our assets were stolen from us by these organized commercial crime syndicates posing as our own dear government. As they siphoned away our wealth, the value of our labor, our natural resources, and money, they naturally became more and more powerful, more sanctimonious, and more conceited. Like their running dog, Colonel Mandelhouse, they thought they were so very clever that the livestock would never catch on. As Colonel Mandelhouse bragged, not 1 in a million would ever know and see through this old, complex, nasty set of lies. And if they did, it would hardly matter because the system would take care of itself. What we have done thus far is to put a very substantial piece of iron rod in their little red wagon wheels and a boot up their butts. Every American, both Democrat and Republican, should now fully realize that they have been betrayed by members of the territorial and municipal congresses beginning in 1868. They have been acting in treason since 1868, chiseling and plundering and pillaging the American states and people for 150 years, and now, like Prince Philip, they have retired to the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico to gush and lush over their bankruptcy protection from the Pope and what they intend to do to us to reduce our population of useless eaters and increase their own profits going forward. I have a different future in view. We reclaim our reversionary trust interest, act in our declared unincorporated capacity, assemble our state general assemblies, restore our federal states of states, call a continental congress, and seize back all our purloined public and private assets, including our good names and estates. We keep our heads together and prosecute them as criminals because that is what they are. We give notice to all the hired law enforcement officers and agency personnel that this is what is going on, and we remind them of their duty to uphold public law and respect the rights of their actual employers. Meanwhile, we get our own records corrected, join our state general assemblies, hold our elections for our land and soil jurisdiction county sheriffs, our justices of the peace, our court recorders, our coroners, our public notaries, and if our public servants, including the members of the bar associations, don't come to heel, we have the option of confiscating their property and deporting them, or exercising extradition and hanging them as traitors and international criminals. Posted Sunday, January 20, 2019.